They laughed when she walked in, called her a joke, a pity invite, a charity case in pearls. But when the cleaning lady took the mic, the entire gala fell silent, because she didn't come to beg. She came to reveal a truth so devastating, it would shatter reputations, expose a decades-old secret, and turn the most powerful man in the room into the most hated. And the best part? She'd been planning this moment for 2 years. The envelope was thick, heavy, gold trim around the edges, sealed with a black wax stamp that bore the Blackwell family crest. It didn't belong in the hands of a cleaning lady. And yet there it was, resting neatly on top of Victoria's cart between a folded dust cloth and a bottle of glass cleaner. One of the junior staff had delivered it. His smirk said everything. "Special delivery, Miss Temps," he said, mocking a bow. From the master of the house himself. A few others nearby stopped working just to watch her reaction. Victoria wiped her hands on her apron before picking up the envelope, turning it slowly in her palms like something sacred or dangerous. She didn't open it right away. Not in front of them. Later, in the staff break room, she broke the seal. Inside, a card thick as cardstock, embossed in gold. "You are cordially invited to the Blackwell annual gala. Dress code, maximum elegance. Location, the Grand Ballroom. Time 8 p.m. Attendance is expected. RB, expected." That word curled in her chest like heat. By the time she returned to her shift, the whispers had already started. Is he serious? She's the maid. Maybe she's going to serve the hors d'oeuvres. She probably thinks it's a compliment. Victoria didn't respond. She polished the mirror in the hallway, without flinching, watching the same people who laughed at her walk by, head shaking, smirks curling. They thought it was a joke, a cruel little stunt Richard pulled to liven up the evening, a way to remind her that no matter how spotless she made his mansion, she'd never belong inside it. But Victoria didn't blush, didn't stammer, didn't decline. She circled the RSVP box with a single stroke of her pen. Accepts. She slipped the reply into the outgoing tray before anyone could stop her. That night, she walked home with the invitation pressed close to her chest, the cold air biting at her fingers. Beneath her calm steps was something else. Something older, something quiet. Not rage, not fear. Intention. Because what they didn't know was that Victoria hadn't spent the last 2 years polishing chandeliers and scrubbing marble floors out of desperation. She had taken the job at the Blackwell estate for one reason only: to step into the ballroom her mother had once been banned from, to walk past every eye that had mocked her, and to make sure that when she finally spoke, they would never forget what she had to say. The first time Victoria walked through the gates of the Blackwell estate, she didn't feel awe, she felt memory. The gravel path, the trimmed hedges, the way the sunlight hit the fountain at noon. It wasn't new, it was familiar. Once upon a time her small feet had danced on these stones, her laughter echoing through the gardens behind a woman with pianist's hands and a voice like warm tea. Her mother, Isabella Temps, had been hired to teach the piano to Henry Blackwell's children. But the lessons turned into late dinners, then secret weekends in Napa, then Victoria. What started as a love story was rewritten as a scandal the moment Henry died, and Richard, his legitimate son, took over. In a single winter, everything changed. The checks stopped. The house her mother had been gifted was repossessed. Their names were erased from the estate records. Just like that, they became ghosts. Victoria was 10. They moved from one rented room to another. Her mother took jobs beneath her talent, taught less, smiled less. But never once did she speak a cruel word about the Blackwells. "They fear what they owe," she used to say. And cowards always hide behind power. By the time her mother passed, Victoria had learned one lesson too well. Justice doesn't fall from the sky. You have to build it, brick by brick, plan by plan. So when Richard Blackwell posted a discreet listing for a new housekeeper 2 years ago, Victoria applied under a variation of her mother's name. No resume, no history, just quiet eyes, and a firm handshake. He didn't recognize her. Why would he? To him she was just another invisible woman. A uniform. A pair of hands that kept his floors shining while he drank champagne and smiled for society pages. But every Tuesday, Victoria dusted the bookshelves that held the original will she knew had been altered. Every Thursday, she changed the sheets in the guest room where her mother used to stay. And every Saturday, when the family was gone for the weekend, she slipped into the study, and scanned documents into a folder labeled receipts. She was never reckless, never loud, because strategy doesn't shout, it waits. She didn't need them to remember who she was, not yet. What she needed was time, access, patience, and now, an invitation. Victoria knew what they saw when she polished the silver, what they whispered when she left the room, what they assumed when she smiled and said nothing. But soon, very soon, they would learn the truth. She wasn't the help. She was the reckoning. The night before the gala, Richard Blackwell stood in front of his walk-in closet with a tumbler of scotch and a smirk that came too easily. "Do you think she'll actually show?" he asked, holding up a velvet tuxedo to the light. The maid, Helena Blackwell, didn't look up from her vanity. She'd be a fool not to. This might be the only time in her life she gets to wear real perfume and not Lysol. Laughter rippled from the other side of the room, where two of Richard's business partners nursed cigars and smugness. "I give her 10 minutes, one said. "She'll panic, spill a drink, and disappear before dessert." Richard chuckled. "I'm betting 5. She'll realize she doesn't belong the moment she sees the chandelier." He clinked glasses with them, the sound hollow and self-satisfied. To them, it wasn't just a gala, it was sport, a performance. And Victoria, just the opening act to their inside joke. Richard had made sure the photographers were briefed. "Get a good shot when she walks in," he instructed his PR team. "We want everyone to see how generous we are, how inclusive." He laughed at the word as if it were a punchline. She's the story, the cleaning lady among the country club crowd. What he didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that while he was rehearsing cruelty, Victoria was finishing a checklist titled Phase 3. In her small apartment, lit by a single desk lamp, Victoria opened a worn folder. Inside were notarized documents, photocopies, audio transcripts, a thumb drive, a final letter her mother had written but never sent, and beneath it all, the Blackwell family ring, tucked into the lining of an old jewelry box she'd kept hidden for 20 years. Everything was ready. She laid her dress out on the bed, deep emerald, hand-stitched, and passed down through hands that had once belonged in the Blackwell circle. Not rented, not borrowed, returned. Victoria wasn't nervous, not even when she imagined the laughter, the cameras, the rehearsed surprise of Richard's welcome, because the trap wasn't his. It was hers. She'd let him build the stage, let him set the lights, and gather his friends like an audience hungry for shame. And when the moment came, when he offered her the mic with that smirk he always wore when humiliating someone smaller, he wouldn't be handing her a spotlight. He'd be handing her the trigger. The difference was, Richard thought this was the show. Victoria knew it was the finale. The valet blinked twice when she stepped out of the car. Victoria didn't rush. She placed one foot gently on the red carpet, the hem of her emerald gown catching in the evening breeze like a whispered warning. The silk clung to her frame, not loudly, but with quiet certainty. It wasn't flashy, it was unapologetic, a kind of elegance that didn't ask for permission. And as she walked through the double doors of the Grand Marlowe ballroom, the air shifted. At first it was just stares, eyebrows raised, glasses paused mid-sip, people nudging each other with half-laughs stuck in their throats. Then came the whispers. "Wait, is that?" She came. Where did she get that dress? She must have borrowed it, or found it on clearance. Victoria didn't flinch. Her posture was regal, her steps unhurried. She moved through the glittering crowd of silk gowns and black tuxedos, like a memory that refused to stay buried. Because they'd seen her before, not like this, but on her knees polishing the very floor they stood on now. The same people who had walked past her without a glance, were now tracking her every movement, trying to place her, trying to laugh it off. But the laughter was thinner now, brittle. Across the room Richard Blackwell spotted her, and nearly choked on his champagne. Helena leaned in. She actually came. "Unbelievable," he muttered, straightening his jacket. "This is better than I thought." He tapped the side of his glass with a silver knife, calling for attention. His smile widened into something rehearsed. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice booming just enough to silence the strings playing in the corner. "It seems we have a very special guest tonight." A few chuckles, a few cameras raised. Victoria stopped mid-step, directly beneath the grand chandelier, its crystals catching the light, casting fractured rainbows across her face. Richard lifted his glass higher, the stage now fully his. Let's all give a warm welcome to the woman who keeps this house cleaner than my conscience. Our beloved housekeeper, Victoria. Laughter, this time louder. Flashbulbs went off. A ripple of cruelty dressed in couture. Victoria stood still. She didn't smile, didn't shrink, didn't pretend. Instead she met his gaze across the ballroom and tilted her head, just slightly. Not in confusion, in confirmation. Yes, I'm here. Yes, I heard you. And yes, you just made the biggest mistake of your life. Richard grinned, mistaking her stillness for submission. He took a sip of his drink, already composing the next line. But he didn't know that in less than 20 minutes, Victoria would take that same stage. And when she spoke, it wouldn't be a punchline. It would be the truth. Come on up, Victoria. Richard called, voice slick with mockery. Let's hear from our beloved Maid. The room erupted. Laughter spilled across the ballroom like spilled wine, loud, careless, staining everything. A chorus of cruel delight rose as phones were raised, flashbulbs fired, and socialites whispered captions they'd use before dessert. Victoria stood motionless under the chandelier, her emerald dress shimmering like a held breath. To them it was entertainment. To Richard, it was dominance, a final stamp of power over the woman he'd reduced to a footnote. She was supposed to laugh nervously, wave him off, maybe turn around and disappear. That was the script. That was the trap. But Victoria didn't move like someone cornered. She moved like someone ready. With no announcement, no hesitation, she began walking toward the stage. Each step a quiet refusal. Her heels struck the marble with the rhythm of something ancient, something earned. The laughter dimmed, not all at once, but like a song losing tempo. Richard blinked. She didn't stop at the edge of the stage. She walked right up the steps, past the shocked MC, and took the mic from its stand with a grace that didn't ask. It declared. She looked out at the crowd, the same crowd that had once looked through her. No one spoke. Even the string quartet had frozen in their seats. Good evening, she said softly. The mic picked up every syllable. Crisp, steady. Her voice wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. My name is Victoria Temps. She paused. Let them sit with it. Some of you know me as the woman who wipes your fingerprints off the silverware, who sweeps the confetti after your celebrations, who exists just far enough outside your gaze to be useful, but not human. Several people shifted uncomfortably. But before I was your housekeeper, she continued, her eyes resting briefly on Richard, I was someone else entirely, someone with a legacy, a history, a truth. Richard laughed nervously, stepping forward. Victoria, this isn't, she held up a single hand. He stopped. I wasn't invited to speak tonight, but I am going to, she said, because for the last 2 years I've been listening, watching, waiting, and now, her voice tightened, not with emotion, but with purpose. Now it's your turn to hear me. Gasps fluttered through the crowd like sparks. Helena leaned forward in her chair. Phones stopped recording for fun, and started recording for history. Because the maid had taken the mic, and something in the room, something electric told them all. This wasn't a breakdown, it was a beginning. Let me introduce myself properly, Victoria said, the microphone steady in her hand. She didn't blink, didn't shift her weight. Her gaze swept across the ballroom like a slow-moving storm. My name, she said, her voice cutting through the silence like silk drawn across glass, is Victoria Temps Blackwell, daughter of Isabella Temps, and granddaughter of Henry Blackwell. A sharp intake of breath rippled across the crowd. Some laughed, soft, disbelieving. Others looked at each other with growing confusion. Richard froze. Victoria didn't flinch. My mother, she continued, was the family's piano teacher. She was kind, gifted, and quietly erased the moment she became inconvenient. When she told Henry she was pregnant with me, he promised to take care of us, and he did, until he died. Suddenly, strangely, and then, everything vanished. Richard took a step forward, his glass forgotten in his hand. This is absurd, he said, voice strained. You're out of line. I'm not finished, Victoria said. It wasn't loud, but it was final. She reached into the folds of her gown, and pulled out a small velvet pouch, unfolded it slowly, held up the ring between 2 fingers. The room gasped. It was unmistakable. An antique setting with a deep blue sapphire, flanked by 2 diamonds, and engraved with the Blackwell crest. A family heirloom passed down through generations. This, she said, was my mother's engagement ring, given to her by Henry Blackwell when I was still in her womb. He never married her, but he never denied me, either, not in private, only in public. Helena sat back in her chair like someone physically struck. He left us a house, Victoria went on, an allowance, and his word that I would be taken care of. But when he died, Richard made sure that stopped. He sold the house, cut off the money, told the world Henry died, with no heirs, no secrets. She looked directly at Richard. But I am that secret. I am the legacy you tried to bury. The ballroom had gone completely still, the kind of still that precedes collapse. You can call it shocking, Victoria said, her voice softening only slightly. You can call it scandal, but you will not call it a lie, because in a few minutes, this room will see proof that speaks louder than any denial. She closed her hand around the ring, and in that moment, standing under the same chandelier her mother once played beneath, in a ballroom she was never supposed to re-enter, Victoria didn't just reclaim her name, she reclaimed her bloodline, and everyone in that room knew, this wasn't a Maid, this was a Blackwell, and the reckoning had only just begun. The room didn't explode. It cracked, like porcelain under pressure, whispers first, then panic beneath the surface. She's lying, someone murmured. Where'd she get that ring? Could it be true? Richard's laugh came late, and too sharp. It rang out over the murmurs like forced applause. Oh, this is rich, he said, stepping closer to the stage. Really, Victoria? What's next? A long-lost diary? Maybe a DNA test in your purse? He grinned toward the crowd, but no one laughed with him this time. She's a maid, a professional manipulator, he added, his voice cracking slightly. Do you really think my father Henry Blackwell would father a child in secret, and not leave a trace? Victoria tilted her head, the way one might look at a child throwing a tantrum. Calm, almost, sorry, no trace, she repeated. Then she reached for the small tablet resting behind the microphone stand. With a single swipe, she connected it to the ballroom's main projection screen. The screen blinked once, then twice, and then, a man appeared, seated in an office lined with medical degrees, salt and pepper hair, kind eyes, voice measured. Hello, I'm Dr. James Hamilton, the video began. I served as Henry Blackwell's personal physician for the last 7 years of his life. Gasps rippled across the room. A few people reached for their phones, but no one dared look away. In the final year of Mr. Blackwell's life, he confided in me that he had an illegitimate daughter named Victoria. He instructed me to begin preparations to amend his will. He wanted her formally recognized. Helena's hand flew to her mouth. Chairs creaked as guests leaned forward. But before the papers could be signed, Dr. Hamilton continued. Mr. Blackwell became ill, rapidly, unexplainably. Within months, he was gone. No, Richard barked. He died of heart failure. It was in the report. The screen flickered again. Dr. Hamilton's face darkened. I now believe Henry Blackwell was poisoned over time. A theory I suppressed under pressure, until now. The video ended. Silence. Then a woman's voice, high-pitched and trembling from the back. He knew and did nothing. Victoria stepped forward, slow and deliberate. I told you I wasn't here to beg, she said. I'm here to show you what truth looks like after 20 years of silence. Richard turned, scanning the room like a drowning man searching for shore. But no one came. The tide had shifted. And for the first time, the empire he'd built on silence, secrets and inheritance, felt fragile. Victoria didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The room was already collapsing around him. The ballroom lights dimmed slightly, as a new figure emerged from the crowd. David Chun, in a tailored suit, briefcase in hand, face composed like someone who'd been waiting for this moment far longer than anyone realized. He stepped beside Victoria on stage and gave a small nod before opening his case. My name is David Chun. I'm an estate attorney, and I've been in possession of Henry Blackwell's original will for over 20 years. Gasps rippled again. Richard's mouth opened, then closed. His voice failed him. David held up the document. This version was dated 3 weeks before Henry's death. It includes a full inheritance for Victoria Temps Blackwell, a legally signed and witnessed testament, one that mysteriously disappeared after Henry passed. He placed the will on the screen. Victoria's name was there in bold print. The inheritance. Half. Not a favor. A right. Helena clutched the edge of her chair. I object. Richard finally choked. That's fake. That's not. It's been authenticated by 2 independent experts. David replied without flinching. Unlike the version you submitted after your father's death. The screen shifted again. Dr. Hamilton stepped forward now. His white hair looked starker under the ballroom lights, but his voice was steady. I was Henry's physician during his final months, he said. At the time I signed a death certificate listing natural causes, heart failure. But I was wrong, and I knew it. The room was a vacuum. Hamilton glanced down, then back up. He showed symptoms of chronic arsenic exposure. Subtle, lethal. I was pressured to ignore it. I falsified the certificate. I let fear win. Gasps turned into horror. Chairs scraped. Someone muttered a prayer. Who pressured you? Someone asked from the crowd, barely above a whisper. Victoria didn't wait. She stepped forward. He did, she said, pointing straight at Richard. Every head turned. Richard paled. My grandfather discovered the embezzlement, she continued. He was going to expose it. He amended the will. He named me. And then, he got sick. Hamilton nodded. After Henry told me about the inheritance change, I began noticing the symptoms. But Richard warned me. Recorded threats, bank transfers, legal intimidation. Richard stumbled back a step. You can't prove any of this. We already have, David said, pulling up the next slide. Lab results. Blood samples preserved under a fake name, tested last month. Fatal arsenic levels. Your father didn't die peacefully, Richard, Victoria said. He was silenced. And the man who gained everything was you. The weight of it dropped like stone. People moved away from Richard, not dramatically, but with instinct, as if betrayal could be contagious. He had spent years crafting a kingdom out of lies. And now, standing in the rubble, everyone could finally see who benefited most from the funeral. No one questioned. Victoria stepped back, not to retreat, but to let the truth take the stage. The first sound was Richard's voice, flat, unmistakable, and cold. If you open your mouth, Hamilton, I guarantee you'll never work again. The room froze. The recording crackled slightly, but the threat was clear. A hushed wave of horror swept across the ballroom. No one moved. No one blinked. On the screen above the stage, another file loaded. This time, it wasn't a voice. It was a document. A wire transfer. $200,000 from R. Blackwell Personal Act to J. Hamilton Memo. Silence is golden. Another gasp. One woman dropped her glass. It shattered quietly on the floor. Richard's face was drenched in sweat now. His lips parted, but no words came. Only air. Victoria stood at the side of the stage, hands folded, still, watching. This is absurd, Richard finally managed. This is fake, fabricated. But another audio file began to play, his voice again, this time rougher, more desperate. I don't care what the old man said. You keep your mouth shut. That bastard daughter and her washed-up mother don't exist. No one laughed now. The projector changed again. A spreadsheet. Page after page of internal company funds redirected through dummy accounts. Dates. Amounts. Signatures. You embezzled from your own company, Victoria said, speaking for the first time since the tapes began. Used your father's death as cover. Silenced the man who tried to help him. And then, erased us. Richard turned to the crowd, searching for any sympathetic face. But all he found were shadows, former allies, looking down, shifting, backing away. Patricia, he barked toward one guest. You've known me for years, tell them. Patricia Weston didn't even meet his eyes. She reached for her clutch, and took a step back. One by one, the powerful guests of Beverly Hills turned away, not with outrage, but with quiet, surgical shame. Like peeling off a name badge at a failed conference. Victoria nodded toward the screen. Final slide. A scanned copy of the original Blackwell will. Her name in print. Her inheritance. Outlined. Henry's signature in faded ink. Dated 2 weeks before his sudden illness began. Richard dropped into a chair, his body suddenly hollow. The smirk was gone. The control was gone. The room, the legacy, the empire, the lies, they were all slipping through his fingers like sand. Victoria stepped forward, closer now, her voice soft but unshakable. "You didn't just bury the truth," she said. "You built your throne on top of it." He looked up at her with wide, vacant eyes. "And tonight," she finished. The ground finally gave way. No applause, only silence, the kind that follows collapse. It was just past midnight when the sirens arrived, soft at first, like a distant warning. Then the doors swung open. 2 uniformed officers stepped into the ballroom, followed by a woman in a navy blazer and press credentials hanging from her neck. Diane Morrison, investigative journalist. Uninvited guest, at least by Richard, but not by Victoria. She walked straight to the stage, clipboard in hand, expression unreadable. "Richard Blackwell," she said calmly, her voice carrying over the stunned room. "You are under investigation for financial fraud, embezzlement, falsifying legal documents, and obstruction of justice. A warrant has been issued for your immediate arrest." Helena gasped. Someone near the back started crying quietly. The rest just stared. Richard stood slowly, like the air around him had thickened. "This is ridiculous," he said hoarsely. "This is a gala. You can't just—" One officer stepped forward. "Sir, please place your hands behind your back." No, I'm Richard Blackwell. This is my house." The officer didn't flinch. "I own this room," Richard shouted. But no one looked at him now. Not the board members, not the family friends, not even Helena. Their eyes were on their feet, their phones, the doors, because no one wanted to be seen defending him. The officer pulled his arms back and snapped the cuffs shut with a quiet finality. The sound echoed more than it should have. Richard's eyes landed on Victoria. He didn't speak, just stared, like if he looked long enough, he might find the version of her he used to control. The maid, the nobody. But she wasn't standing like a maid anymore. She was standing like someone who had already won. Diane turned to the crowd. "For the record," she said, lifting her voice just slightly, "every asset gained through criminal means is now under review, including the company, the estate, and all associated holdings. Additional charges may follow." The officers led Richard toward the door. He passed by the champagne table, the marble floors he'd once ordered her to polish, and the stage where hours earlier he'd tried to humiliate her. Now the humiliation was his. Not loud, not dramatic, just real. The kind that seeps into bones when power is stripped away in front of witnesses. Outside, camera flashes lit up the night as reporters swarmed the steps. The gala, once meant to boost Richard's public image, was now the setting of his downfall. Victoria remained on the stage, unmoved. And when the doors finally shut behind him, a single thought settled over the room like dust. The maid didn't just survive, she finished the story he thought he was writing. 6 weeks later, the Blackwell building looked different. Not from the outside. The glass still gleamed, the marble still reflected the skyline. But inside, something fundamental had shifted. The corner office, once guarded by silence and ego, now had its door open. Inside, Victoria sat behind the same desk Richard used to gloat from. But there were no cigars, no ego-polished plaques, no gold pens, just a framed photo of her mother, a notepad with real numbers, and a handwritten list titled, "People Who Never Had a Chance, Until Now." She didn't fire everyone, only the ones who built their careers on stepping over others. The rest, she promoted. Quietly. Fairly. Custodians became team leads. Assistants got training stipends. A single mother from accounting received a paid leave package she'd begged for under Richard, and been denied. Victoria didn't make speeches. She made systems. Wages were raised across every department. A scholarship fund launched for employees' children. A domestic violence support fund, named after her mother, opened in 3 states, and for the first time in company history, entry-level staff had voting seats at the executive roundtable. Some called it radical. She called it overdue. As for Richard's fortune, the true will, verified, notarized, and now legally binding, had named Victoria as the rightful heir to half of Henry Blackwell's estate. The other half had been left in trust for philanthropic purposes. Money Richard had siphoned for years now flowed in the direction it was always meant to, outward, not upward. Helena finalized the divorce 2 weeks after the arrest. She sent a short letter before leaving the state. "You protected my children, when their own father didn't. I won't forget that." Victoria didn't reply. Not out of spite, just peace. The phone rang often now. Friends from galas and golf clubs suddenly remembered her name. Patricia Weston sent flowers. Vivian Chambers sent a note written in careful cursive. "We were wrong. Please let us make it right." Victoria placed the flowers in the break room. The note went in the shredder. She didn't need apologies from people who only found their shame when her last name changed, because she hadn't changed. She'd simply stepped back into the space she was never meant to leave, and every time she passed the front lobby, where her old ID badge used to scan her in as housekeeping, she let herself pause, just for a moment, not to gloat. To remember, because power wasn't the win. Restoring what was stolen, and using it to lift others, that was the real inheritance. The auditorium lights dimmed as Victoria stepped onto the stage. No spotlight, no music, just her and a room full of students, some in crisp blazers, others in hoodies and hope. Future leaders, they'd been told. The next generation. But tonight they weren't looking for inspiration. They were looking for truth. Victoria stood at the podium, calm as always. She didn't read from notes. She never did. "When I was your age," she began, "I thought the world would eventually correct itself. That if something was unfair, time would fix it. If someone did wrong, the world would notice." A few students leaned forward. "I was wrong." She let the silence linger. Justice doesn't arrive. It's not a knock on the door. It's built, quietly, deliberately, brick by brick, and often by people no one notices until it's too late to stop them. Murmurs of agreement passed through the rows. "Some of you know my story," she continued, "about the man who mocked me, tried to humiliate me, the one who never asked where I came from, because he assumed he already knew." A pause. He thought he was untouchable, but what he didn't understand was this. Revenge is loud, but justice. She stepped away from the podium, closer to the edge of the stage. Justice is precise. The room stilled. Revenge wants a crowd. Justice wants a result. Revenge burns it all down. Justice rebuilds, so no one else has to live in ashes. Applause started low, then swelled, but Victoria raised a hand gently, not to stop it, just to soften it. "I didn't win," she said. "I rebuilt, and that's harder. It's slower, but it lasts." She looked out across the faces, young, fierce, waiting. If you ever feel small, ignored, underestimated, remember this. Power doesn't come from being seen. It comes from seeing everything, and choosing when to act. She smiled then, not the smile of someone victorious, the smile of someone whole. As she walked off stage, no music played, no confetti fell, but something lingered behind her, an energy, a stillness, a truth. Not the story of a maid who became an heir, but of a woman who took every brick thrown at her, and built something no one could tear down. Not fame, not vengeance, legacy. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Share it with someone who's ever been underestimated. Tag someone quietly building their legacy, brick by brick. Leave a comment. What's your version of justice? Because the world doesn't change through noise. It changes when the quiet ones finally speak.